Good afternoon. How is everybody today? I'm Mike Haggerty, and I've got Mike Clayton here, along with Bryan Kenney. Looking forward to an opportunity to talk to you guys. Lots of stuff happening. Man, we've got World Championships just wrapping up. We've got Bryan Kenney, who just finished up a huge gold certification program. Had a chance to visit with him a little bit this past weekend. So glad you guys could jump on. Mike, it seems like we see each other more than I see my wife, man.
How often does that happen?
It's crazy, isn't it? But we just we had an opportunity just this past weekend, and why don't we tee off things with that? We were here in Kansas City. Mike and Bryan, you guys were both up here this past week, and we had a silver college certification college going on. It was fantastic. Over 40 people that were here, over 40 coaches that were working towards their silver and possibly even ultimately towards their gold. And then the people that are also working on their gold certification had an opportunity to present, and that's where Bryan fits in, right, Bryan?
Yes, sir. Yeah, it was great seeing you guys. And I will start with, we did have some Kansas City barbecue, and coming from Dallas, I was impressed. It's not quite Dallas barbecue, but you guys did a pretty good job with it. So
I don't eat barbecue, but I'll tell you this. I didn't even know Texas had barbecue. I thought the only barbecue was here in Kansas City. So
all right. Well,
sponsored by the Missouri Cattlemen's Association.
Come on down.
There you go, man. And the whole Arrowhead experience and the tailgate and all that stuff. So yeah, definitely. That's sort of like what we're known for. We're not known for a whole lot here, maybe in Kansas City, but we certainly are known for the Chiefs and tailgating and all that. So, but we so much appreciate you, Bryan, and I know that you've been working hard on your gold certification, and certainly that's one of the things we wanted to touch on this afternoon. And Mike, I mean, that's probably something that you would like to tee off here, because that's your ball of wax. That's your thing with the certification program within the National Coaches Education Program.
Yeah, that's it. That's my baby. And, to have the opportunity to follow these coaches along their journey, it's their opportunity. They step forward, they say, hey, whatever this process is, I'm willing to jump in, because I think there's going to be something on the other end of this process that I'm going to like. And some things along the way that are going to be challenging, that will help me understand a little bit more about who I am and who I want to be. And if that's all that the process can be, and some folks can jump in, some folks only get to go through that once in their life. I get to watch coaches do that, every day, all year. I'm trying to remember if Bryan is 89 or 90. He might be number 90, but I know we're under 90 or less certified gold in the U.S. So it's a heck of a process. And we want to make the process more transparent so that people know what to do. It's just a question of that motivation if they want to do it. So I guess that tees the question off, as you say, Mike, to Bryan. Why? Why did you want to do this? What the heck was wrong with you?
Well, my wife asked that question a lot. But honestly, when I started, it wasn't necessarily like, oh, hey, there's this gold certification, I want to go get it. That really wasn't the goal. It really was just continued education. There was opportunities to learn more. I mean, I've always went to coaching clinics, and anywhere I can, what we learned this weekend, pirating, I always just said stole, whether it be drills, techniques, coaching philosophies from, honestly, people smarter than me. And I'm okay to say that's really where this process started. And once I dove into it, and, really the first silver college that I attended, I was hooked. And then I was like, okay, I'm getting gold. I'm going through this process. And, as I told Mike this weekend, I'm like, all right, so we check gold off the list. Now we got to start working on platinum or diamond, or make up some new thing, because really I'm more motivated now as a coach than I was when I started this. So it just really has opened up so many doors, and if you want to call it opportunities or learning moments that before I started this, I didn't even know existed. So this process has honestly been awesome.
That's really, now, Mike, you did your gold What year did you finish your gold? Because you were the Coach Ed guy. You were the guy in my shoes, early
Sure.
90s.
Yeah, but I didn't actually finish up my gold until Doc Bennett was in there for an interim period. And so I just went ahead and completed. I had most of the tasks completed. I just hadn't organized those. And so I sort of gathered all my stuff and put it together and then submitted it to a doc and got it taken care of. But I think that it's a great opportunity, like Bryan's talking about, just in the whole context of continuing education, and whether or not it was going to be gold certification or paper certification or whatever it might be. I really didn't care. I just knew that I wanted to continue my journey, even though I had left the position behind when I left USA Wrestling back in '93. But certainly to me, there was always that hey, I want to learn more. I want to be able to gather some more information from those people out there that have been there, done that. And I think that we all know that there's probably areas where we have our strengths. Bryan, I'm sure you feel the same way, that you have areas that but what I really liked about the program is that even in the Silver College back, and that was a long time ago that I completed that, but in the Silver College, there were areas that I probably needed some, information from people that were really good at what they did, whether it was in sports psych or whether it was in sports physiology or whatever it might have been. But there was always opportunities to grow from people that were experts in those areas. And you'd always picked up some new technique. And so it was just an accumulation. Even though I have my gold, I certainly feel far from the fact that I'm done learning. I feel like there's more out there. Though we don't have a higher level of certification in USA Wrestling, I'm sort of like Bryan, man. I'm always trying to pick up new stuff, and I'll continue to go to clinics, even though I had an opportunity to present at this clinic. I'm always learning from people there, from the coaches that were in the audience. It's like we had some really fascinating discussions on some things, and so I don't think in this sport that you can ever just say, well, I reached the pinnacle, I'm a gold certified coach, and it's all over.
And what I tell my team, I'm like, I expect you guys to continue to learn, evolve, get better. So as a coach, I need to be doing the same thing. So, I use the example of my team. If you finished medical school in, 1980, that's awesome. You're a great doctor. But if you don't continue to evolve for the next 30 years, you're not going to be a good doctor anymore. And I feel like in wrestling, even when I started, I did things exactly the way, okay, well, this is the way we did it. Well, that's not necessarily the greatest way to look at things anymore. So, how am I going to pick and choose what to change to add to our program?
How do you start to open up? How do you start to get to that first step where you say, maybe there's something here for me, and maybe it's bigger than me, or maybe it can help me be bigger? I don't know how that works.
Honestly, both. It was, kind of like Mike was saying, that really that when I started the Silver College is really where I realized how much I didn't know. And, I had some solid teams and, all that in the past, but, we got to listen to, all of you guys present, at that clinic. Me and Coach Mayab ended up wrestling in that classroom till about 1:30 in the morning. I know that surprises everybody. Before he needed to be on a flight, I think it's 6 a.m. or something, we had tables moved, and, we were drilling an A-frame that night. And, just the amount of, information that was available that I didn't necessarily honestly know existed or where to find it. I mean, you can find technique on pretty easily, but to be able to pick people's brains of, hey, what would you do in this situation? How do you coach this? That, how do you take a kid that's 14 that's never wrestled before? What can we gear towards him? And then just the opportunities that in networking that this has created. I mean, I've got to have a conversation with, Gwiz and Don Bradley on okay, I get a heavyweight come from football who's 14 and 260 pounds. What is the first thing you're going to teach that kid? And, it's probably not going to be a low single or even a high crotch at that point. So how do I tweak that technique maybe for that kid rather than the, 106 pounder who's jumping off the walls? And, that even those little things have really changed our whole dynamic of the program here. And it's been awesome.
And to follow up a little bit, with that, Bryan, I also think, we were talking about some of the technique, or we're talking about the classroom experiences. But one of the things that I am so excited about when it comes to these kind of things is the networking that goes into it, and the opportunity to talk with other coaches, people who are like-minded, people who are excited about growing in the sport. And when you get into the sort of the spirit of that, that never goes away. It never gets old. And like you say, picking Gary's mind, good luck with that. But I
do that once a week.
I love, as everybody knows, Gary's my very best. But certainly that network is absolutely huge, and to be able to, like you say, to talk to Dom or talk to Gwiz or talk to anybody for that matter, I think the USA Wrestling, and especially in the NCEP, or the National Coaches Education Program, it really validates those experiences of being a part of a network that is bigger than any one individual. And, that's the experience to me that is bigger than any classroom experience, any technique experience, is just that open network. And the other thing that sort of follows in line with that is that it creates a true humility, that these people are willing to talk to us and to talk to them and create this network, and nobody really walks around with an ego. It's like, whether it's the instructors or whether it's the people that are there, everybody's a bit humbled by, the gathering of the intellect of that entire group. There were 40 coaches or better there this weekend. And I would say that collectively, there were some pretty smart individuals that were in that room that were discussing technique and, different strategies, different types of philosophies in the sport. Our session, obviously, on nutrition, but it's really exciting to see that. And that's what really, I think, takes us to a whole nother level. If this was all about technique, we wouldn't be where we're at as a country. This is more than just about technique. This is about creating special people that have people in their corners that have humbled themselves to be a part of an experience for those world team athletes that we just saw do so well over this course of this past week.
It's funny. One thing you always forget something when you set up a clinic. And with one of the training center clinics, they had everybody in the room have a sticky. And on the yellow sticky, what they said was, write down an experience that you had with your favorite coach, like a very memorable experience. And if it was something technical, like a move or a skill, write that down and put it to the wall on the right. And if it was something that, you really related to your coach on a personal level, and they took care of you, and it was, not such a technical skill, but it was a personal human skill, write that down on the sticky and put it on the left. And then, you've got 3 minutes. So everybody kind of writes it down, and they start to mingle, and you realize that 99 out of 100 people in the room are not putting anything down about a skill. It's all about that emotional connection and those things, right? So it's not about that end result at the end of the day that we end up remembering. I always forget to do that doggone episode. So we'll just send this clip to the Silver College folks on the WhatsApp group, and we'll be good.
No, I think that's a great point, though, Mike. And I think that that's what most coaches get from these opportunities, is the more, the nurturing of the network as opposed to the technique. And everybody's going to walk away with some stuff. They're going to have some stuff in their bag, their toolbox, when they walk away. But to me, I don't think that it compares to the network itself.
It's created for me multiple different group texts. I know we'll talk about it later with some different activities that we've been able to do. But I've got group texts with coaches from Pennsylvania, Missouri, Arizona, Colorado, that's been 2 year, 3 year long group texts that have just honestly turned into really good friendships based on, like you're saying, I mean, just people that are like-minded, bouncing ideas off each other. Hey, how would you handle this? We're looking at going to this, this tournament. Are you bringing anybody? And I mean, it's just really been an awesome experience with the other people, the other minds that you get to bounce ideas off of.
Bryan, I have to ask you, we've talked before some, but my question to you would be is, what's your biggest motivation as a coach right now? What's driving you at this point in your career? You said you're still thirsty to go to gain more, knowledge, et cetera. But what is the motivation right now for you?
Honestly, it's, to do things that I never knew, like I said, existed, never thought I could do. When I started wrestling, I was horrible. I shared that in my presentation this weekend. It didn't make sense. Coach telling me do this thing. Hey, pull his leg in. That sounds great, coach. I have no idea how to do that. And it's given a lot of my kids, that motivation. Hey guys, it doesn't matter how good you are when you start. That makes no difference. It's the path of what we're doing here. What are we learning from this? And I really feel driven that this is where I'm supposed to be. Whatever that, driving force behind you is, that I'm actually able to make a difference, change the world, whatever term you want to use, that I'm doing exactly what I'm supposed to be doing. I'm giving opportunities that I never had, that I didn't know I had. And, through this process, it's opened doors for a lot of my kids that before this process, I couldn't have done that for them.
So the opportunities that you're working through now, you're a coach in high school?
Yep.
Tell us a little bit about that.
So I'm at Plano East High School in Plano, Texas, which we're just northeast of Dallas. Our district is a little unique where we have an 11, 12 grade campus. And then we have 2, 9, 10 campuses that feed into it. So between the 3 schools, we're right about 6,100 students. So it is a very, very large campus. There's 3 schools in our district. And we have, women's wrestling, obviously in JV and varsity. So I have kind of a unique position where I travel and coach kind of throughout the school day at the different campuses. And in Texas as well, we have your sport is your athletic period, which is unique from a lot of places. So if you're in wrestling, you're in football, you're in baseball, that is your PE class throughout the year. So after folk style season, we're training Greco during our PE class here. So it's a pretty cool setup the way that we have it here. And then also, I also own me and my wife just opened the Power Training Center, which is in the town next to us, Wiley. It's about 4 miles away from school and 4 miles from our house. So opening up a gym, wrestling training center in the middle of a pandemic has been, it's been an adventure, but no, it's honestly been awesome.
Talk to us a little bit more, Bryan, about your club with Power. What does that represent?
So take you back a little bit. My high school team was the Thunderbolts out of Tinley Park, Illinois. I went to Tinley Park Andrew. So that's part of the Lightning Bolt has always been, kind of part of it. When we moved to Texas after college, we were here for 8 years, then moved to Tampa. Became a fan I was at Tampa Plant High School and became a fan of the Tampa Bay Lightning. So we moved back. I had a lot of shirts that had a P on it from Plant High School. I'm like, okay, well, our club has to have something to do with the P because I have a lot of gear that we're not going to get rid of. And my school was already black and gold. So it, was my wife thought of the name. Well, what about Power? I'm like, that's awesome. Perfect. And so through our club, then now we were looking for a facility, obviously through COVID. This last year, we couldn't have our youth club at the high school. So we were renting space at a volleyball gym, and, we're throwing kids, and there's volleyballs coming across the mat, and, little 6-year-old little girls are looking at me like I'm scary, which I kind of am. And so, it was just something me and my wife had been talking about for a long time. I've got a background in strength and conditioning, and it was something that we had been looking for. And it was kind of funny that my wife was like, all right, you know what? We were looking at different warehouses and buildings and just weren't finding the right fit. Commercial real estate is pretty expensive. And she's like, okay, let's just take a break from this right now. And, at that point, our son was about 8 months old. And I'm like, sure, babe, you could take a break from it. Well, I didn't. I was still looking for property and end up finding one. And I'm like, hey, babe, I found the perfect spot for our gym. She's like, I thought we were done looking for this. I was like, no, you said you were done. I just nodded my head and said, okay. So we went and saw the space. It was a cabinet company that had never been vacuumed in a long time. We got 8 big garbage cans worth of sawdust out of it. Ended up power washing the building. Just so y'all know, if you power wash sawdust, it kind of turns to like a paste putty stuff. Yeah. So that was fun, just spraying the ceiling of sawdust, and turned it into a wrestling gym in January. So we've got weight stations, squat rack areas, wrestling mats, turf, cardio area, and now we've added an outdoor turf area. We've got about a 40-yard football field. We bought turf and expanded into the back, took over our area of the parking lot and turned that into a football field where, we push tires and, push sleds, flip tires, hit tires with sledgehammers, lots of hand fighting out there. And that's really kind of how it started. We've recently added jiu-jitsu. We've also added an adult wrestling class this month. So it was something that I've been talking about. Why are there so many adults that are willing to try jiu-jitsu but not wrestling? So what do we need to do differently with that? And, this is our first month doing it. We've got a handful of guys that are coming in, training, learning. 2 of them wrestled for me before that are just older, want to still be on the mat. We've got, one of the guys who's a black belt in a bunch of different martial arts, and he just never wrestled before. So he's, kind of picking my brain that way. And yeah, so it's been definitely between teaching, having 2 kids, being a high school coach, and running a gym has been a busy last 10 months. So
you're going to have more kids?
No, we're tapping out. We got a boy and a girl. We're good.
Hey, Bryan, you brought up something that I've long thought about, and I would like to pick both your mind and Bryan's mind a little bit on this more. You mentioned that a lot of people are willing, adults will try martial arts, at least experiment with it and give it a shot, whereas most adults are not going to do that in the sport of wrestling. I have my ideas. I'm just curious what your all's thoughts are on that.
Bryan,
you want to start with that one, or you want me to?
Sure. I mean, for me, I think it's comfortable with contact. When we're very young, we're not very comfortable with contact. But once we get there, right, we're just, we're wrestling around from the time we're kids until the time we're at a point where maybe we feel not as safe, not as secure. And I think in martial arts, typically things are a little bit less intense, less continuous, more systematic and structured. So it's, hey, I have my gi on, and it's a turn, and you're pulling a jersey, right? You didn't just have somebody grab your head and club you a little bit, and then try to put your head down into your knee, and then drive your head in, and then just jump on you and try to put all their weight on you. It's a much different skill set, I think, when we're talking about the discipline of the martial art versus the the training required for wrestling. So, but this is what's important is for the long-term athlete concept in wrestling, how do we keep people involved in wrestling longer? And what does that look like from a health standpoint?
What do you think, Bryan?
And I think a lot of it is, my high school, we'd go in, we'd warm up, we'd go live for 2 hours and head out. And I'm 38. I'm not going live for 2 hours anymore. That's not happening. But we can still get a great workout out of wrestling. You can still learn from wrestling. And if you go to a lot of the jiu-jitsu places, and, I've been picking a lot of people's brains, they're not going in there and just going live and, clubbing each other in the head for 2 hours. It's a lot of learning. It's, some conditioning, it's push-ups. It's more of a team feel of, hey, let's train together.
Social.
It's social. And, and you see that, jiu-jitsu does a great job of, what we call sparring or flowing. And I think it takes a lot of the ego out of, for wrestling, of that idea, I can't give up a takedown. I'm almost 40. I can give up a takedown. I'm not, if I'm going to compete again, it's going to be, in the Masters, or, I did a beach tournament 2 years ago, and, my days of being able to roll with Kyle Snyder were never existent, let alone today. So that, that doesn't bother me. And I really think that, wrestling's fun. So at our age, we don't need to go in and do a 30-minute grind match and, see if we still got it. And that's kind of what I've talked to some of the people that have reached out to me. Maybe I ran some people off that were former college wrestlers. I'm like, hey guys, just so you know, we're not training for the US Open with starting this class right now. And maybe we make an adult fun class and a competitive class in the future. And that's okay. But, I think that precedence had to be set from the beginning that, we're going to work out and you can train as hard as you want. And this isn't going to be the olden days to see if we still got it.
I think you guys both hit it. I think in a different way, you're both saying sort of the same thing. And much like what I think as well, where jiu-jitsu and some of the other martial arts, you can be very successful in the martial arts because you're basically competing against yourself. Sort of like even in golf, where in golf you compete against yourself. You're out, if you shot a 5 over the day before, you'd like to shoot 4 under the next day, one of those things. But you're constantly sort of like playing the game against yourself. Martial arts rewards people for their platform as they progress through the sport and their knowledge and everything else. Whereas, and you both nailed this, I think personally, when you talk about throwing in the competitive element, it's like, well, too old, body doesn't hold up the same. So I'm not being rewarded for that. I'm not being rewarded for the knowledge that I have of the sport or that I was able to master a specific technique. I'm being rewarded whether or not I get a takedown, or I'm rewarded whether I can go through that grind match, as you mentioned, Bryan. So to me, I think that if we could adjust the award system or the reward system in some way, and it might even be too that we've talked a lot about this, right, Mike, about with our kids, that the focus needs to be on skill advancement, and that if we continue to push the idea that the competition model is the most important thing when these guys are 6 or 7, somebody's winning and somebody's losing. And, somebody that doesn't have maybe the skills at the age of 6, but maybe they could master those skills by the time they're 10 or 15, and they're pretty damn competitive. So I don't think it's a lot different for adults as it is for some of our youth, and that the stick-to-itiveness is often there because of that. So I really do think that there's something in that. If I were an adult and I said, hey, you know what, I'd really like to try to get back in shape, wrestling isn't the one that I would probably lean into, because it's just not going to be productive for you. Whereas martial arts, you can move up, you can see a level of success on your own, regardless of how you would compete in a competition at a jiu-jitsu tournament. So it's interesting. I just always curious what other minds think, that people have been around, for a while. And now that you've got your club and you've got guys coming in and gals coming in for something like that, if you see those kind of elements, that I'd be curious.
Yeah.
And Bryan, talk a little bit more on the club side, your relationship in wrestling with both the boys and the girls side of wrestling. The growth of the women's wrestling is so important to our sport right now. How do you as a coach take a look at that and support, one or both sides of this?
So for the high school side, it is a little bit different. So I actually have a girls wrestling class, girls wrestling practice. Girls wrestle in the morning, varsity guys wrestle in the afternoon, which as far as recruiting goes, and I've talked to a lot of people, you're either everybody practice together team, or I feel like you're separate teams. And it seems like everybody has a very one side or the other. I really like having our guys and girls separated. And I'm a dad. I've got a 7.5-year-old little girl who knows more wrestling than most of our high school guys, because she doesn't have a choice. That's where her Saturday's been her whole life. But she wants nothing to do with competing right now. And that's great. She can defend herself if she needs to. If we want to look at wrestling as a martial art, she'll be okay. But she loves dance. She's in competition dance and all that. We're in the wrong sport if we're trying to make money, let me tell you. I need to turn my wrestling club into a dance studio, I think. But, with saying that, your daughter has never wrestled before, do you want your 14-year-old in the same practice as senior 18-year-old men? And I think there's something to be said about that, I love my guys. They're super respectful and all that, but it's different. It is. And, throwing them into the fire of, well, wrestling's wrestling. I do get that when they know what they're doing. And, maybe separating as a JV only, varsity only. That could be it too. We just don't have the mat space for that. So
sounds like you're giving these young women a safe place to learn the sport before they jump in with both feet.
Right. 100%. In our club, we have, it's just practice. And so once they kind of get their feet underneath them and want to take, their training to the next level, if you want to put it that way, our club has youth practice and advanced practice. And, some of those middle schoolers can be ready for that high school practice. And then we've got some incoming freshmen who aren't. And, that's okay too. So, that is a little bit different. And in Texas, the other thing too is that guys and girls cannot practice with each other in the high school room. So that was part of the reason why Texas got women's wrestling so early was, part of that rule that a lot of people don't agree with, but I think it ended up, the coaches back then were able to flip it on a lot of people and, gave women's wrestling here, a real early start, because men and women couldn't compete with each other in combat sports. So, you've seen, we've had a lot of successful women come out of Texas that, were able to maybe wrestle earlier, felt comfortable wrestling earlier than maybe they would have elsewhere.
Here's a quick question for both. Mike, this is for you and Bryan both. Again, my question would be if, we've obviously got some coaches listening that probably have maybe started their journey in the coaches education program. But what would you say a coach that was like, well, I'm thinking about maybe signing up for this bronze, or I'm thinking about signing up for this silver. What does that look like? What's that journey look like for the younger coaches that are thinking seriously about getting involved in tracking like you did, Bryan, into the bronze, into the silver, and then maybe even ultimately their gold? You might comment, Bryan, on how it looked to you when you journeyed through that. And Mike, maybe you could comment on from a global perspective of what it looks like for our coaches that are participating in that series of coaches clinics.
So the way I looked at it was kind of, why not? I always had my copper and bronze from years ago. I kind of got that right away when I started coaching, but I didn't do much with it. And then once I started, exploring what other opportunities to learn there were, like I said earlier, it wasn't necessarily like, hey, I'm starting my master's degree to get a master's. Most people don't just take classes to get, some more knowledge to get it. They're either getting an MBA or you're not getting an MBA. And that's kind of the way I looked at it, was I'm just going to pick and choose some cool things that I think I can learn from. And then it turned into, okay, I'm all in. I'm learning from this. Why not? And, through that, I've got to do some really cool things and learn from some really cool people. But I would tell anybody, start the process. What is it going to hurt you to learn something? And then, hopefully you get hooked.
Oh, that's awesome. And hooked is what we want them. Randy Hinderleiter in Kansas always used to say, it's like a virus, like an infection. He said, I want to infect you, with coach education so that it keeps moving. And that's been my process in this position, has been, let's find ways to get more people involved in the process. So let's refine the process, make it easier to follow. Now you can log in when you're a member of USA Wrestling as a wrestling leader. You can log into your profile. You can go to manage, coach certifications. And if you've got your copper and bronze, you can click start and manage silver tasks. And all of them are laid out right in front of you. There's no guesswork. We talk about how to do each task. The toughest part is just finding that tab the first time. Because if you can find it, now you know what the elephant looks like. And you can start to take each of those individual bites of the elephant to start to break it down. Hey, I'm going to do this task, or I'm going to do that one. And one of my favorite things is when coaches just call and say, hey, I've got it all up on my computer. Can you sit down and just walk through it with me and let me talk through it and make sure that I'm on the same page? Because now once they've got it, now they just go in a direction, they start cranking it out. And the worst thing is for me just falling behind, not getting tasks graded quick enough. So for everybody listening out there, if you still have tasks that need to be graded, I'm sorry.
And guys, to kind of add on that, like throughout this process, like there's certain things, as I've kind of went through it, that you realize maybe you have a real interest in, or maybe that's your niche that you didn't necessarily even know was a niche. And, kind of through this, I've got to work with Coach Mayab on, USGRIT. And sorry, I don't know how to do that backwards there we go, in the camera. But, I found a niche that, hey, this is where I'm throwing, most of my effort at. And I didn't really, before I started this, there wasn't USGRIT. So really there wasn't that avenue. But, and I presented on periodization planning only because honestly, I just thought it was the hardest to wrap my mind around. And that's kind of where it started. And since my presentation, I've gotten, my email's been blowing up. Hey, I heard you did a periodization planning. Man, I'm struggling with that. How did you get to that point? And, back to the networking piece, Mike, you're saying that, all right, well, people around the country heard I figured out periodization planning, which I have not. There's no secret formula for it. If I did, right, that'd be awesome. But, I've been able to help people with something that I struggled with. So.
Yeah. And that, interesting too, Mike, I think Bryan and I were talking about this. What you just brought up is that periodization is a very complicated thing for a high school coach. I remember being out at the OTC one time talking to one of the strength coaches out there about periodization, and it was complicated for him to even think about doing high school, because he was dealing with national team athletes, and they were captive because they're all there. They're all pretty much very high level athletes. And so there's a lot of commonalities with that group. Whereas, Bryan and I were even joking about this a little bit. When at a high school, you've got first year freshmen that have probably never trained in a weight room. You've got wrestlers that have put in, 4 or 5 years of training, and they're pretty sophisticated, and maybe they're coming into your program and had some weight training. You have some athletes that are football players or multi-sport athletes that they're doing some other different types of training. And then all of a sudden you're asked to put all this together in a periodization program that makes some sort of sense where everybody grows from it. And it's like, even the coach that was at the OTC when we had this conversation, it's like, dude, I don't know what to tell you. He goes, when it comes to high school athletes, it is the most complex group, because at least at college, you know, they're sort of like going through that funnel of skill levels, and their you know, muscular development stages are completely different.
They know how to deadlift.
Yeah,
right?
they know what a deadlift is. You that's not the case at the high school level. And what we're asking our coaches to do at high school is almost an insurmountable task.
You know, I love that we bring this up, because what can you break these things down to? Is this a problem? Yes. Is this something that needs to be addressed? Yes. You know, you talk about Gary, right? Every problem has already been solved. Every battle's already been won. So what's the fix? Well, most fixes are, let's improve our organization. Let's improve our communication. If I'm an administrator running a high school, I maybe invest and make sure that I've got a strength coach in that high school. And that strength coach is going to be like the marketing person of my company that has their hands in everything, right? I know when Mike Clayton is running cross country, that Mike Clayton is also getting ready for wrestling season, and he's going to wrestle at 119, and that he's also in drama club, and he's not going to be getting a lot of sleep. So how am I going to get this workout primed for Mike Clayton, right? And if you can do that with one key central communicative area, the athlete's smarter, the parents are smarter, the coaches are smarter, because you've got that one body of knowledge that can educate everybody. And how do we let go of that control, right? If I'm an administrator and say, hey, have I found the right person? And how many times, gosh, you know, we hear all these situations where somebody hires somebody and it turns out to be the wrong person 3 years later, 5 years later, 10 years later. And you're like, what did we waste by not really vetting the people that we brought in and allowed into our inner circle? So there's a lot of these things that we bring one good person in, they can change a community. You know, I know that's a big reason Gary went back to Kansas City. They don't just want him to teach wrestling. Yeah, I'm sure that's going to be great. And they don't care if the program's winning state in 3 or 4 years. That'd be great if it is. They brought him back to build a community, right? Brian, that's what you do. You build communities. And Mike, that's what you do. You build communities. And we talk about these relationships. So I'm on my soapbox right now, which I will jump off of, but gingerly, because I'm getting old and I don't want to twist anything. So.
No, those are great points. Brian, what else do you do down in Texas that helps, maybe from, like Mike says, a promotional area or from a marketing perspective to grow your sport? Obviously, you're doing some really great things down there and making things happen. How do you see that? Do you put a conscious effort into it, or are you more just about, hey, if they show up, we're going to service those kids and the parents, et cetera? Or are you out trying to kick the bushes a little bit?
Well, honestly, I'm recruiting for both programs. Mm-hmm. I mean, you know, the club side, we got rent to pay for. We got to keep the lights on. So that creates a marketing side there, which is interesting because some of the kids in my club are going to be competing against my high school kids at district, regional, state. And, you know, the way I'm looking at it is I'm going to work with who wants to get better. And those are two separate jobs, personalities, whatever you want to call it, that have to take place. And then at the high school, I mean, I'm still hallway recruiting. And, you know, I've been lucky. I mean, our program has right now we've got 53 wrestling only guys, 14 wrestling only ladies. And then we usually get, you know, between 30 to 40 from football. So we get a big influx from our JV football program every year. And, you know, part of it is they've seen, I mean, we max the kids at the beginning of wrestling. We max them at the end. And therefore I have, you know, raw data that says, hey, if you join wrestling, your average will go up 30 pounds on bench. So that's what we're looking at. Is that going to help you in football? Well, yeah. Okay, well, I can show you the other football wrestling guy but coach, you guys don't bench every day. Yeah, we do a lot of push-ups and pull-ups. Do you think that's going to help your bench? Well, yeah. And we do bench during the season too, but having those, building the relationships like you're selling your, a community. I mean, we have a community of wrestling here. We talk, we hallway recruit, and I say we because I put recruiting off on our team. And I tell them, I'm like, hearing something from me, I'm just another, wrestling coach trying to make my program better. Hearing it from the teammates, hey, you guys got to join this. We're going to be good this year. This is going to be fun. And that definitely helps. And I think really the sell of, hey, I have my varsity, my top 14 guys on the guys side, my top 10 girls, everyone else is JV. Guys, I can enter 50 kids in a JV tournament. You're going to get matches, because I think a lot of the kids, and it was difficult at a big school like this, that a lot of the kids see sports as, well, I'm not big. I'm not a large, I'm just a little guy. Awesome. You could be a 4-year starter and never weigh over 105 pounds. It's going to be great. Wait, really? And I think sometimes being at a big school, it almost brainwashes the kids that, they're looking at these 6A football players in Texas. Well, coach, I can't do that. Great. You could be my 106 pounder for the next 4 years. Oh, okay. Well, and having those, constant conversations. I go to every PE class that first week of school and, sell our program of, hey, you can do this. We've had guys fighting the UFC come through Plano East. King Mo, Muhammad Lawal wrestled for Plano East, back in the day. We've had Guy Metzner come through here, and we've had, Nathan Rankin, who's still running cross country in college. So, I try to show, like, hey, when we talk about wrestling's for everybody, that's true. And so I think that's an easier sell. Whereas, yeah, I'm sorry, you could be really good. My 113 pounder is a really good football player, but this year he decided, coach, I'm 113 pounds, that I could be a really good athlete, but I'm going to get smushed out there. You're like, yeah, man, you are. Sorry to say it, that the wrestling, if you're 5'9" like I was, my opportunities to play basketball growing up in Chicago were limited. I wanted to be Michael Jordan. It wasn't happening for me. So, when we talk about recruitment, I think it's got to be constant that, hey, we want you here. Check it out. Come see what we're doing.
That's some really good information, Bryan. I think we'd be remiss if we didn't at least acknowledge this past week and what went down in the World Championships. And, and again, I do see that a lot of the success has been generated through a grassroots development. And you look at the athletes, you look at the success, especially of the women's program in that vein. This has been a grassroots effort for the last many, many years. And not to say that, our national team coaches aren't doing their jobs. They certainly are, and putting it all together in construct. But it has been a very, very interesting ride. And, hats off to our national team athletes for what they displayed in Oslo just this past week. I don't know what your guys' thoughts were. I got to watch pretty much all the matches, but it's been amazing to watch the success of USA Wrestling.
6 for Adeline Gray. Come on, 6?
Yeah.
Wow.
It's crazy.
Wow.
Adeline's
just dominant. It looks like she's getting better every year.
I know.
I would agree with that, Bryan. You see some things from her that maybe you didn't see 3 or 4 years ago, too. And, I think she's expanded her toolkit a little bit. And how about Jordan Burroughs? Jordan, oh my God. It's just about the time that people were, he's special. He's the best ever, maybe, or one of the best ever for sure. But, he's on his way down, and he loses in the trials to Dake. And it's like, well, it's probably, you know, the career is starting to fade a little bit. But I saw an interview with him the other day, right before the competition, and I don't remember whether it was on Flow or where it was, but somebody asked him the question, and he said to the effect that, yeah, I'm probably not at my peak, but I'm still pretty damn good. It was something, I'm paraphrasing, but
Right.
it was one of the best quotes I'd heard in a long time. I'm still pretty good. It's like, yeah, I guess so. Coming off of that another world title, so kudos
it shows
to everybody with
the
USA
depth
Wrestling and what's taking place this past week.
Oh yeah, you're right, Brian. The depth and Helen Maroulis.
Yeah.
I mean that alone, right? To have the Olympic gold, that's something that, you know, has still, you know, Adeline still hasn't had a chance to attain that yet. And you got to think with a short quad, you know, maybe Adeline's going for
2.5 years now or whatever.
Wow.
Right?
Wow. And you're right. I think the developmental camps, I remember, I mean, my early years here, watching the developmental camps as they were continuing to improve and how they were including more and more young women in the process and getting more coaches involved in that process and the growth, the patience that it takes to build it and build it right. But, you know, Terry Steiner, his staff, those people around him have done that. And that developmental system brings these young women in. They're committed. They're motivated through this program. And I still think the best is yet to come. My gosh, what's still coming that we haven't even heard of yet is well,
look at our Olympic trials. I mean, I wonder, I'd like to do the math on what the average age was. Because, I mean, there were a lot of young women in the semifinal matches. So, I mean, it shows that those young ladies are not too far behind.
Right.
No, that's a great point. They're right there. They're knocking on the door. Our youth and our, you know, USA Wrestling is just powerful. And so it's exciting to see. We're in a really great period of time, I think, right now with the sport. So I think we're going to be a force to be reckoned with for quite some time.
Hope so. Crushing it. I like to sit back and watch now. That's what's awesome. I don't have to wake up sore the next day.
Well, Brian, so you're not coming. You made a statement here. You're not coming out of retirement and going in these grind matches and trying to jump back in the picture, huh?
Yeah, I don't think so. You know, I'm good.
Well, if you're not going to do it in your 30s, I'm sure as hell not going to do it in my.
What's that? Hey,
it ain't happening.
I got to work out with you know, Dom Bradley this weekend, and you know, I looked around and I was like, hey, one of the bigger guys here. You know, I told my team, I'm like, hey guys, how many opportunities do you get to roll with somebody like that? I go, so I went to Dom and I was like, hey, do you got to practice? You need a tackling dummy. I should say practice partner, tackling dummy. Let's make that real clear. Oh no, coach, I'm like, sold. Let's go. And yeah, I was a little sore the next morning, and you know, he's quite a bit bigger and stronger than I am, and I'm okay. I'm okay with saying that. Yeah. So
he moves off
he's a force, man. You grab hold of him, he's a piece of meat. I'll tell you for sure. But I'll tell you, he has a really good understanding of the sport. You know, he teaches well, he communicates well, and I'm so proud of Dom and what he's done over the years and his accomplishments, and love seeing him give back. And you know, Mike, you reached out to see if he would be able to come in. He's down the road in Columbia, a couple hours down the road, but he didn't even hesitate it yet. Yeah, I'd love to. So he loves giving back. He loves working with and especially with kids. I mean, he's really has a great time with kids and runs a really good practice. So
I was watching him during the clinic connect more and more with the coaches, and he brings his personality into it, and I think that connection, Sammy did that on day one. Sammy Henson comes in day one, and you know, it's just Sammy, and it's his energy. Like, you can't not connect with Sammy. It's like you're either connected or you're probably walking out of the room. Like, there's just no in between. But Dom just finds that way, and you just love him. He brings you in, and then to watch him as he moves at that size, that's like ballet. To watch how he hits those level changes, it's it was pretty to watch. I have more fun now, just kind of big picture watching and soaking that in. Man, and just so professional. How you said how he coached, how he teaches. He's very thorough. Even when he says this isn't really how I would do it, but if I was coaching a lightweight, this is how I would add this. So he's so meticulous about how he taught. I was very impressed.
Any last minute comments, Mike, Bryan? Anything before we close the door on this one?
I just got to say thank you guys. Mike, thank you for, the coaching, because that's really what you're doing. I mean, you're coaching coaches. We've talked about it before, and, you've helped me. We had a situation last year that, I lost an athlete on my team that, there was no, thankfully I hadn't had to deal with that many times. And, I didn't honestly know how. And there's legal rules when someone's not 18 of what you can say and disclose. And, I talked with Mike a lot about that, a couple different times on how do I coach my team through this, if you want to put it that way, because I don't really know how to deal with it. And, that we were talking about, a moment that stood out, that really did. And there's been a couple times throughout this process that I've, really been coached up by everyone involved with this program. And, it honestly, I can't say enough of thank you. I mean, it has guided and changed the way I look at, myself as a coach and do things as a coach. And, it's not all about state championships. It's not. We all want to win, and that's a hard line to we're coaching to win, but at the end of the day, what are we doing to change the world? So, I can't say thank you guys enough, and just the opportunity and the knowledge that I've been able to pass on to my programs, and the confidence to open up a gym during this and, create this club and do these things that years ago I thought, wow, that would be really cool. I can't believe these people are doing those things, to put myself in a situation to experience it and, bring my team along has been just honestly amazing.
I think that's great. And I think there's a lot of, there's some courage that's built in this path, right? There's some courage, and guys, like you say, are willing to step out and do some things maybe that they would never have done. And I think we've all experienced that inside of USA Wrestling and what it brings to the forefront for our coaches and officials and athletes, et cetera. So, well, it's been a wonderful experience. And Bryan, Mike, thanks for joining in. And we'll be back again in a couple of weeks with our next edition of Heads Up Podcast. So take care, everybody.
See you.